In this lecture, we're going to be taking a look at common table expression, also referred to as CTE. So most of the times you'll hear individuals refer to it as CTE. What it does is that it allows you to define a temporary name result set that is temporarily available during execution of statements such as select, insert, update, delete, or merge. You can also think of it as a temporary table. You can also think of it as a named temporary table. Now the difference here is that you can do a query on top of the CTE, which you'll see later on in this video, right? But on a temporary table, you cannot do that. So it follows this simple syntax here. You have the width and the expression name. This is required. And the name of the columns that you want to return in your result set. Please note that these columns are optional. So the first step is to define the CTE expression name and the column list, which is optional, right? And then you're going to specify as. So this is where you define the query for the CTE. This is just like your regular SQL statements. So after you define your CTE query here, at the outer portion of the CTE, you define your outer query. So this will be like your select statement. So here's where I'll say select from and the name of the CTE. So I'm just going to put an asterisk here. So first you define your expression syntax, then you define your query, and then here is where you'll perform operations on your name result set. So let's take a look at an example of finding the total number of sales orders per year of each sales representative. So the first step in the CTE is that you're going to define the expression. Here I'm returning the salesperson ID, sales order ID, and sales year. Now in this section, I am defining the query for the CTE, which will find that result. So if I execute this statement, it will be executed. However, at this point, the query is only returning each sale for a person, and here the sale was done. So in order to achieve the total sales, we need to do a count on the sales order ID. So here, we are defining the outer query that will reference the CTE, because remember, the CTE is like a temporary table which you can now run a query against that table. So here I'm getting the salesperson ID, I'm doing a count on the sales order ID, I'm saving it as total sales, and I'm getting the sales year as well. Now here's the key, which is the from, which is selecting from the CTE. So here I have to group by the sales year, and then I have to group by the salesperson ID. Then I'm just ordering by the salesperson ID and the sales year. So if we execute this query, you should get the result. You will see the total sales for each salesperson for each year. So you can see that. So here you can see that the salesperson with ID 274 had 4 sales in 2011, 22 in 2012, and 14 in 2013. So this is how you can use CTE to execute your queries. Now it's also important to note that there are some applications that may not support CTE. So you'd have to rewrite your query, maybe using temporary tables or subqueries to achieve that result. If we remove a column from the expression definition, then we'll get an error. As you can see, the CTE has more columns than specified in the column list. So right away, it picks up that we are returning more columns than what is defined here. However, you can get rid of this completely, and then the error will go away because the column list is optional. So if we execute this query again, we should get the same result. It's also important to note that you cannot execute the CTE partially. So for example, if we're supposed to execute the with CTE portion only on the query, it will throw an error. It is important to note that the scope of a CTE is limited to the query that immediately follows it. Once the query is complete, the CTE is no longer accessible.